Let me stop and just ask if there's questions about that, because I felt reality.
How long does it take to really repeat that? I mean, can you get it in one time, or usually like a habit
not.
is like 18 times or something like that? Do you need it more than that?
I would. There's a special emotional state that you'll have when you know that you got it. In meta states, we talk about some of these real prime states, like yes and like no, which are so foundational that build up other things like decision and beliefs. But there's another state, and it's stronger than yes, and it's the state of okay. Because when you feel okay or right, that's the way it is. It's so much part of the fabric of reality. So do it until you go, of course. It's a state of course. Of course. So repeat until you go, of course. Because of course means that it's the fabric of your reality. So you can say yes until you have of course, or repeat it until you have of course. And so the repetition, whether it's 10 times or 10 days or 21 days or whatever, just repeat until you go, of course.
Is that the same as acceptance?
No, it's very different from acceptance. This, of course. If I said, your skin's red, you came from Mars. And you say, no, and then you say, you're a human being born on Earth, and I would say, you're a human being born on Earth? And you go, yeah. So it's a yes, but it's a deeper yes. What are you, crazy? Of course.
So it's more of a knowingness in here that, yes, I mean, just, well, it's almost natural then?
Well, it's almost undebatable.
Undebatable.
It's like it's not up for question.
Yeah.
It's not up for question.
Yes
Anything
no
different from it doesn't compute.
Yeah, yes with no doubts.
Yeah, yes with no doubts at all. And it is, of course. Now, when you meet somebody who's in an of course state, I mean, they don't even consider whatever you're offering. So we have to work with, because things can get to that place of course.
Does that mean there's no negotiation?
Yeah, it doesn't compute. It does not compute. It won't get in. So think about something that won't get in, that somehow it is so much just, of course, just the way it is, that you won't even consider it. Who would like to come this evening and we'll get some little child and slice it open and just have child sacrifice? And if your feeling is, of course I wouldn't do that. But then there's a couple. All right. So the of course is something that's so ingrained that is not up for question. It's yes without doubts. It's just there. And so we can drive something in. Repetition will do it, of course. And of course, if you're born inside of some frame and it's not up for question, nobody questions it. It's just unthinkable. It's not computable.
Just for clarification, is this a state that athletes, work to get in? I'm thinking about Manny Ramirez, who will probably be in the Hall of Fame. The time he gets out of the dugout, he does the exact same thing. He takes his practice swing in exactly the same number of steps. Everything is exactly the same every single time. And Mark Price, who still holds the free throw record for the pros percentage-wise, he hits it. You do it the same way every time, and implicit in that is they take the emotion out of it.
Uh-huh.
They just make it automatic. Of course I'm going to make the shot. Of course I'm going to hit a home run. They take the emotion out of it.
Yeah.
Is that what you're talking about?
Exactly, and that is another distinction. The emotion is taken out. It's just, of course. It's like I don't have to fight it or argue with it. I just dismiss it because it's not computable. It doesn't come in because I've got this reality. Of course.
The image I was thinking about, because since you're talking about linguistic actors, they have to say dialogue. Mm-hmm. They have to learn. But if they were just to say it, just a dialogue like that, then you wouldn't get it. So they go and study acting technique to inhabit that and get into character so that almost if you didn't hear the words themselves, by you looking at them, you would get of course by looking at them, because that's what their body said.
Right.
So it's almost like that's using that sort of technique.
Yeah.
What if any of these, of courses, conflict with any of your values?
So the question is, what if any of these of courses conflict with your values? So if it's of course,
But you don't have a particular high, making money or being successful is really high on your list of values, maybe 7 or 8. There are other things that are more important. Trying to instill this in, and you have to go back and restructure your values, reset them.
so a good question, because if you're going to take a principle and it's a principle about a certain area, but it's not a principle for all of your life, then you may never get to the feeling of course. You may get to the feeling of, I believe in that and I'm taking these actions, but it wouldn't go that deep into this is the very structure of reality. So as you think about some principle you really want in, and you keep repeating it, my guess is you'll self-organize so that it's about my financial thing, but that's not integrated into the highest what I'm living for. So it'll be sequenced out that it's about this or that, and not, fully integrated. Okay.
Can you reprogram? And of course, I mean,
Yeah. Sure.
I mean,
Of course.
even if even though it's that cellular deep, you can actually change it.
This is where going up the meaning ladder and doing a threshold. If the of course doesn't work, of course I'm a nothing, of course I'll never amount to anything, of course life sucks, of course, so you get someone who's integrated that well, and what we have to do is threshold them through pain. So like AA says, you have to hit bottom, because they've got this as their fabric of reality. They can't even consider. And so you offer all the positive things, and it just doesn't make sense. They just know you're crazy. And so what we'll want to do is not argue with that belief that's that integrated. We'll want to ask them the quality question: does it work? Does this make life a party? Do you want to install this in your children? And we get them to say no. We get them to disown the very thing that they're inside of. No, it doesn't work. And we threshold that. How much doesn't it work? And what else will it lead to? And what else? And we just get it worse and worse so that they will start to say no to it and even start questioning it. Yes, no is the structure of doubt. So the yes, no that we two states, it's a structure of doubt. I think this is so. No, it's not. Yes, it is. No, it's not. And that's a structure of doubt. We go back and forth between yes and no. So once they start saying no to it, so you think that's true. You think that's the way it is, but you hate that. You don't like that, but it's the way it is, and you're stuck there. And this is a great state to be in, right? And we just get them to start questioning and doubting, and doing things like that to break up and to loosen that. So that would be the way to undo that, of course.
When you talk about the dreaming up at the top and then the performance, at the bottom there's boredom, right? But I'm a real dreamer, and there are times when I've been dreaming and I've been bored. So is that where I'm not challenged enough in my dreaming, or?
Probably you're not actualizing enough of that dream. Because if you took it out into the world, my guess is you're not going to get bored anymore. Because now things are happening. So taking it out and seeing what happens, experimenting and taking the risk, and that'll get the adrenaline going. That'll wake you up. So the pattern that I want to do first is at the back of your book. It's the last pattern in your book. It's in 82 in my book, unleashing possibilities. is the name of the pattern, Unleashing Possibilities. Before I do a demonstration with this, I just want to walk through, give you an idea of where we're going to go with this, and then give you a couple tools to be able to do it that's not written in the pattern. So this pattern is unleashing possibilities. You began 2 days ago with thinking about something you'd like to be unleashed to. Anybody here wants to unleash your leadership potential? Anybody here want to unleash your financial potential? Your charisma potential? Your happiness potential? So we'll play around with these. Me. We'll play around with these as we walk through here. So number one, you've already done. Identify something you want to actualize. What would you like to experience more fully? Let's say leadership, let's say happiness, let's say charisma. What behavior or skill would you like to perform? Well, I'd like to demonstrate more leadership. I'd like to lead people to some of the visions I have. I'd like to be more charming and interactive and smiling and pleasant so that people are attracted and feel attracted to me as a person. What state or emotion would you like to experience more fully? So, well, the state is going to be the state of having a vision and going first and seeing if anybody shares that vision with me. So the state of passion maybe, the state of being visionary, or maybe the state of just caring and being friendly if it's in charm, or maybe just the state of being pleasant and comfortable if it's happiness. So what is the state? How have you been awakened to this possibility? What has awakened this in you? So what we're doing is grounding it. What's the trigger? What's exciting this? Well, I read a book on leadership, and I got this idea about emotional leadership by Daniel Goleman, or insightful leadership by Giuliani. So what triggered it? Well, I saw how happy this person just seems to be as they move through life, finding happy things, and so what triggered it? How much are you awakened? How much are you awakened? How much more could you be awakened? So the first step here is just really getting clear what ideas, urges, wants lurk at the edge of your awarenesses that you would like to make real. Do you have a clear vision of actualizing this potential? And so the first one is just identifying it. Identify the potential or potentials inside this. What would be the mental potential that you need to be a leader? What would be the emotional potential to be a leader? Or the verbal, the linguistic powers, or the behavioral, the action powers, or to be charming? What would you need to think and represent and ideas so that you'd just be charming to people and caring and concerned and compassionate? What would be the heart of that? What would be the language of that? What do people who are real good modelers of just being influential, charming people, how do they talk as they interact? And do they touch? Do they? What is their behaviors or gestures? So as we look at, now we're breaking it down to smaller components, the mental, emotional components of that. How do you know and evaluate this as a potential? So now we go back in. How do I know there's a potential for me? Well, I can talk. I can use words. I can use those kinds of words that leader seems to be calling forth, or that person who seems to be caring and touching. So how do you know? How would you evaluate it? Well, if I heard myself using people's names more often, if I heard myself doing that 5 times a day, I think I'm moving toward being more personal. So we have some kind of a way of evaluating it. So it's grounded in something we can start to measure, because that's going to be that synthesis. What will let you know that you have more of it, or that you've given birth to this potential? So once again, another way of finding some measurement. And so as you identify that, so a couple more questions. How would you measure this? How much have you actualized to this date? Oftentimes we've actualized a lot, but we've never counted it. We've never acknowledged, oh, I've got it to this level already. Because I look at people in the face when I talk to them. So that counts. Because if I didn't, if I ignored them, act like they were invisible, that wouldn't be very charming. So how much have you actualized, or how much of a leader are you already? And as you identify leadership skills, maybe congruency, maybe vision, maybe passion, maybe the ability to say words that excites other people to want to share that, well, I've got it some. And this starts breaking that either or. I'm a leader or I'm not a leader. Because the truth is you lead some people sometimes anyway. And every leader doesn't lead all the time, everybody in every instance, but they also look to thought leaders, creative leaders, productive leaders. So it breaks that either or. What resources do you need for unleashing your potential? So whatever your potential is, what capacity can you activate to make this possibility true for you? What capacity, what capability, what response ability do you have that you could start tapping as a response? And as you start looking for, one response I never make to anybody is I never put my hand on their shoulder and say, well done. So I have the ability to put my hand on the shoulder and say, well done. So as we start looking at so now we go inside to the meaning ladder. What beliefs would support that? What decisions would support that? What meanings, what intentions that would make this richer to actualize this potential? So my internal resources as my frames of mind about that. So if I have a belief, people like to be dealt with personally. That'd be a belief both for leadership and for being more charming. So if I have that belief and strengthen that, people really like that. I like that. And most people like that. So if I had that belief and put that belief more there, and maybe make a decision from this day forward, I'm going to look to see if I can interact with people in that way. People like to tell their own stories. So there's a belief. My intention is to hear more stories, to give space. So as I identify beliefs and decisions and things that is going to help me to get into the state to actualize that, my resources. What external resources might help to tap this? So now I look outside to see external sources. And so this may be how you dress. It may be some of the paraphernalia that you may want to take with you to set up your office, to set up any kind of a structure, to create different. So what can I do externally that would facilitate this? That would help to that'd be a resource. So as you, whatever field it is, whatever area, as you look around to see what would facilitate this. And this is an area that I don't think we spend a lot of time in NLP talking about. We've been talking more about it in meta-coaching in the last couple of years, talking about the environment you create. When someone walks into that environment, because you've got control over that environment, is it going to be formal or informal? Is it going to be full of fun things and things to do, or is it going to be very intimate and very close? And what kind of music? What kind of smells? The whole environment. What environment brings out the best in you? So external resources that will help you to unleash this potential. A number of years ago, I started thinking about that and realized that if writing is one of the things I really want to do, then I want to have an office that brings out the best of me. So I had a new house built and had an office about the size of this room built with all windows looking at the mountains. So I could put my computer there and be looking at the mountains and have all that natural light and have walls of bookshelves. And so what environment brings out the best in you? And so looking for external resources and what environment do you want to create so that it helps people when they walk in, they're in a special environment that facilitates whatever you're doing. So contributing factors that will bring these potentials forth. So that's resources as we get resources for the potential. Number 4 is going back to the axes. How meaningful is this possibility? How meaningful is it for you to be a leader, to be charming, to be happy? How meaningful? What other meanings could you add to it? What else could it mean to you? What significance would it hold if you fully tapped and unleashed this? How intensely have you dreamed this? How much more intensely would you like to turn this up? How valuable is it? What do you believe about this potential? How challenging do you find it? How passionate do you feel? So any kind of questions about the meaning, the qualitative meaning and the richness, and you can use meta questions there. As we then ask the performance questions, what have you been doing to translate this potential into reality? What have you been doing? What's worked? What's not worked? What have you been doing? How have you been trying to bring it out in your behavior, in your gestures, in your face, in your voice? How have you been bringing it out? How long have you been developing it? Who has mentored, trained, coached you in this potential? Do you need someone to facilitate and help you coach it out, train and give you some training of skills? Do you have a support team? Because sometimes my potentials need to tap into some resources of those around me as a team to support it coming out. Especially at first when I'm just practicing the first steps of it and I'm kind of wobbly. Who can support me in this? When I wrote my first wealth building plan, in wealth creation we create a 10-year wealth building plan. When I first wrote mine, because I've been reading in the field for years and never did anything about it. And I kept reading, write a plan. You know, business plan, good idea. And I said, I understand that. I even believe it. Never did anything. So I wrote my plan. And I realized the only way this is going to work is if someone calls me up and holds me accountable. So I called up Bob Bodenhammer from North Carolina, and I said, Bob. Actually, he said, Michael. Because I talk this way, and he talks that way. And I said, would you call me once a week and ask me, what have you done? And just knowing the call's coming, I better look in the paper to see if there's anything that maybe is owner carry. So I can say, Bob, I made 4 calls this week. Bye. Michael, you did good. Sorry, Bob. Yeah, was I home when he called? So having a team, having someone to support you who will hold the space, as it were, as a crucible, hold you accountable and help you with, so you can turn to them and say, I'm having some struggle with this leadership or this happiness or this, and can you support me? So looking to some other people with that. What action plan have you made for your next steps? So a leadership development plan, a personal development plan for leadership, a personal development plan for charisma, for happiness. So what's your plan? What's your steps? What are you doing this week? And have you broken it down so that you do something every day? And what one thing can you do this day that you can do another day, and as you get your action plan? What has not worked? What doesn't seem to enable it to grow? And what has only minimally worked that perhaps needs to be done more consistently? How would you best mind to muscle the great idea or vision so it becomes your way of being in the world? So you can ask many, many other questions. These are just a beginning to prime the pump in thinking about how can I make this real in my life. So we'll ask those questions because those questions will help us to start synthesizing and moving it to that zone of optimizing that potential. Profile your meta programs governing the potential. Where are you on the continuum for each? Put a check where you normally operate. For instance, if you think of yourself as mostly a big picture kind of person, perhaps a check would be at the quarter position as shown below. After that, put a set of brackets for your range. What's your range of consciousness, your range of awareness with regard to global specific? And how much flexibility do you have in that? And then how much more do you need? And is it a driver, and do you need to extend it? So what I'm going to give you now are a bunch of questions for this list. I don't have that written in your manual, so you might want to just use the blank page to write these questions. But these questions will be questions, if you know the meta programs, you won't need these questions. If you know the meta programs inside out, But if you don't, then you'll probably want some of these questions. I'm going to put them in a little different order than they are. So the first one is the possibility-necessity metaprogram. And the question is, what is the possibility for you? So what's the possibility? And when you go to the other side to synthesize it, what do you have to do? What is the requiredness? If you're going to be a leader, then the possibility is my vision, I can be the first to go and invite others to share this vision that we can make something together as a team. That's a possibility. What's required? Relationships required. Connections required. Rapport required. Compassion's required. What's absolutely necessary? Time involved in doing that's required. Now, if necessity, I have to do this, I have to call, I have to interact. If necessity, you may need to metastate that necessity to give yourself permission to let something be required. If your potential is, I want to have more physical health and energy and vitality, that's a possibility. To wake every morning feeling alive and awake. What's required? Eating right, exercising. It's just the requiredness of our bodies and of reality that's outside of us. We don't create all reality. We create reality with the stuff that's out there. And bodies have to move. Bodies have muscles and joints, and they need to be moving. The heart and the lungs need to be moving. So they're requiredness. And if you think about it, I've got to move my body, and I've got to burn the calories I consume. So there's requiredness. So what is required now moves your consciousness to performance and the constraints of reality, social constraints, economic constraints, physiological constraints, political constraints. What are the constraints that you're going to have to deal with? And what do you have to do? What's required? So that's the first one. Let's make the second one internal-external. How rich is your internal references? How rich is your internal references about this? When you think about what you want to do, my vision of being a leader, my vision of being charming, my vision of living in a more happy, pleasant way. And the opposite is, how clear are you as to where externally you're going to make your reference point and lock it down in some behavior? So internal reference is your internal game, and where are you going to play that game, and with whom and where and how? So external. Who do I want to lead? Who do I feel like would be part of a great team if we could do this together? With whom do I want to be more charming and pleasant and kind? So internal game, external, inner outer game. Question 2 would be, where do I want to, and with whom and when and where do I want to play this internal game to make it my external game? So the internal game might be, how rich is that internal reference of thinking about energy and vitality? Now, where am I going to be moving my body and exercising, eating right? Maybe I could park a little bit further and walk. Maybe I could walk the stairs. You know, where am I going to play it? A lot of times we make things so hard for ourselves because it has to be some great big thing. But like exercise, you could just walk a block. You know, if every little thing counts, and you feel good about it, and you enjoy it. So instead of the great big things, just every little thing counts. So where do you want to play this at? How do you want to play that?
Have you heard the term underwhelm yourself?
No, underwhelm yourself. Okay. Okay, good. 3, let's make reflective active. Reflective. So the question for reflective, are you willing to reflect on this more? How much reflection have you given this? How reflective are you in this internal world of that possibility? And then the opposite side is how ready are you to do something about this? Will you do some? Are you ready to be active and to actively translate it? What can you do proactively? What initiation can you take now about this? questions directs our awareness and expands our meta program. So these questions are going to expand the meta program. The next one underneath that is being and doing. Being and doing, the next one on that list, being and doing. So we'll make that number 4. Are you willing to just be with this experience of leading, of being charming, experiencing energy, feeling pleasantness and happiness? Are you willing to just be with it? And what is that like when you're being with that for you? How do you know you're just being with that? And then as we translate it as doing, what is the performance you want to do? What will you do about this? What effort, what sweat, what discipline will you put into making this real as you do something about it? So as you can hear, I'm just asking questions about each of these polarities. Because to ask the question, you have to go there and answer. And as we just keep massaging the continuum. Number 5 is perceiving, judging. What are you perceiving about this possibility? What's your perception? What else is in your perception? What else could you perceive about this possibility? I perceive that I could step up into leadership and become more elegant as a leader, more as a resonant leader, more as a thought leader, more as an administrative leader. And so what's your perception? And then judging, the way we translate that in NLP is, what are you doing to make that happen? What in life are you getting to adjust to you? Because perceiving is you just adjust to this concept of leading or charisma. What are you doing to make it adjust to you? So how are you making the world adjust to you? What evaluations do you have to make? What judgments do you have to make? What changes do you want to bring about in your world? Well, the change may be, if I'm going to be a leader, I'm going to have to speak up. That's the value. I'm going to have to stop being quiet and passive. I'm going to speak up and just assert what I'm thinking. And so that might be one of the requiredness, one of the judgments to make. Number 6, we'll go to the top there for global specific. So the 6th question is what is the biggest vision or dream that you have? What is the biggest, grandest, most global picture, vision, dream that you have about this possibility? Let's say you become a leader. How could you become a great leader? Let's say you become more charismatic and touching and compassionate. What would be the grandest dream that you have about that? And so now we're expanding globally. And then over on detail or specific, what specific behavior will you do to release that grand vision? What specific vision will release that specific behavior release that grand vision? What one thing can you do today that'll detail this out into your countenance, your voice, your gestures? So what one thing can you do today? For question 7, let's do options, procedures. So this possibility of being a leader, this possibility of being charismatic, this possibility of fitness, this possibility of happiness, what are some other options? What are the alternatives? What options can you have for just expanding this and getting this even bigger? So what options of leading? How else could you lead? How else could you touch maybe you could do some writing, maybe some speaking, maybe organizing a team, maybe leading a committee. So what are the other options?
Sort of like what other frames would you vote for?
Options other frames. The frames would be more that global and the reflective, reflecting on other frames. This is now getting to other options of how to be the leader, the charismatic person, the fitness. It fits more the doing, but it's options of doing. So as I'm dreaming and creating meaning, like before, like I don't have to go to a gym. I could just spend more time walking. That'd be an option. I could take the stairs to the elevator. That'd be an option. I could sit in my chair even when I'm sitting and just do some deep breathing. There's an option. So it's like my inner game is getting richer with all kinds of ideas. I haven't done anything yet, but these are the options, the alternatives. Now we're ready for procedures. So what will you do first and second and third? What's the ritual you'll set up? What's the procedure? What's the formula? So now we're going to create a ritual and a formula, a procedure. So what will you do this day, this week, next week to make this, to move this forward? So a procedure would be, so what's your strategy? So that's good. So what's your strategy? First, second, third. As we put it on some kind of assembly line so that we can produce this new performance. So what's the sequence? Number 8, intuitive sensor. Intuitive sensor. Intuitor is asking about what's your gut feeling about this vision, this possibility? What's your intuition about this? What other intuitions, things on the edge of your awareness could you bring out as part of your intuitions about this? So intuitions. And then at sensor, what are the sensory qualities? What will you see? What will you hear? What will you feel? What will you smell? What are the empirical qualities of this performance, this as you perform this possibility, this potential? Number 9, we'll do in time and through time. In time is when you get lost in time. You're just inside time and time doesn't exist. So the question with the in time, when you think about this possibility, when you think about this potential, how much can you just get lost in the eternal moment? When you think about this possibility, how much does it just pull you in and you can dream with those intuitive skills and that big picture and you just get lost in time. So how rich is that inner game as you get lost in time? Through time is sequential time. This is the strategy, the sequence, the steps. So what will you do today? When today will you do it? What will you do at 10 o'clock? What will you do at 11 o'clock? What will be the schedule? How will you keep account of the schedule and hold yourself or let someone hold you accountable for making it happen hour by hour, day by day, week by week? Well, yeah, we could do a process. We could do a timeline process by putting it out and stepping aside. The question is this expanding consciousness. Because to answer the question, when will you do this, where, what time, how often, how much repetition, is it in your schedule book? Is it in your date book yet? And 10, we'll do matching and mismatching. Mismatching is looking for differences, and matching is looking for sameness. So what else could we add to this? What other different qualities would you like to have as part of your leadership or happiness or charisma? When are you not being charismatic or happy and pleasant and a leader? Is it appropriate at times to be a follower? Is a good leader a good follower? And so now we're looking for differences and asking differences questions and mismatching. When we go to the other side for sameness, how ready are you to focus specifically on the things that will match your plan? Can you follow the things that will match your plan? How ready are you to focus specifically and fit and correspond those potentials that you have on your plan? And the last one, number 11, is qualitative, quantitative. So qualitative is the quality and quantitative is the number or measurement. So qualitatively, you can ask any any criteria, any value, any standard. How compelling is this? How exciting is this? How spiritual is this? How mindful is this? How personal is this? How ecological is this? So what qualities do you want in this potential? What are the qualities of a leader? What are the qualities of charisma? What are the qualities of fitness? Qualities of pleasant happiness? And then ask any of those specific quality questions. How will you measure that? Will be the quantitative. How will you measure it? How will you know? What's the evidence procedure? So 11 meta programs that fit into this structure. And now that you've got some questions for the meta programs, we can begin to do that synthesis between them. And that's what we're aiming at, to move into that middle between the two. So if self-actualization is a function of synthesizing our meta programs, expanding our meta programs, so that I have full range of awareness and consciousness, the questions will drive you to each side. And so if you're a meaning maker and you live in the world of dreams, ask these performance questions until it's just part of how you think. I think it was Richard Bandler, might have been somebody else, said that meta programs is a model about what you delete. So if you're a global thinker, you delete details. If you're a detail thinker, you delete the big picture. If you're a matcher, you delete the differences. If you're a mismatcher, you delete the sameness. So if we delete the other side, we just expand it to have full range of consciousness.
So I managed to follow that. You're saying that if you're a global...
Your tendency would be to delete the details.
Right, okay. But then when you say expand, you mean if you're like a global, then you maybe want to expand the other.
So I have more details in my awareness, and the questions will drive me there.
Right.
Now, there are some patterns in the book, Figuring Out People. We've got 7 patterns for expanding and changing and altering, working with meta programs. But the simplest way is just ask the questions repeatedly until your brain automatically goes to both sides and has that expansion.
So basically, this is not meta programs used in the traditional way, though, as I understand meta programs. You know, what you're... okay.
The classical.
Classical. Pure NLP.
The orthodox.
The orthodoxy. This is heretical NLP. Don't tell the Pope. Richard. Yeah, we're infidels.
Anyway, are you suggesting that we go through and we rate ourselves on each one of these better programs, and for those that were on one end or the other, that then we attend to these questions?
Yeah.
Should we attend to these questions?
Exactly.
Okay.
To create that expansion.
All right.
That meta programs will define the kind of personality you experience at this point in time, but meta programs is not typology. And in NLP, we don't think about people being types, but just functioning in a certain way. And if you find that you function more globally, just expand it to details, and this will be the pathway for unleashing more potential.
So the goal is more range in all of them.
Range and expansion of consciousness and awareness. We've just picked out these 11 that have to do with these two axes, meaning and performance, so that these are the ones that make people great meaning makers. These are the ones that will enable them to perform those meanings. And these are the ones who make people great movers and shakers and getting things done. These will enable them to make them really rich and robust. So we want that expansion. It's in your manual somewhere. Have a search party and see if you can find it. Wrap this up, we'll go for a break. 36.
Are these specific ones that you've chosen out of the meta programs to, or would they all, or if I went back and looked at all the meta programs, would they all sort of fall into that?
No. So Chris has asked, are these the ones that fit meaning performance? And these are the ones that strike me as fitting these two scales, and the other ones don't fit into them. Now, you may find some that do, and if you do, let me know. But these are the ones. So as we went through that, you could probably tell the questions you could answer more easily, the meaning questions or the performance questions. Which were the hardest for you? The meaning questions or the performance questions? Because it's like you don't send your brain and you don't live there. Or you don't send your brain to the other side and live there. And so that's what we're doing, just expanding that consciousness. So because whatever you're strongest in, these metaprograms are these, whatever you're strongest in, it'll be your strength and it'll be your weakness. And so we just...
You're asking these questions, you notice what is your preference as to, you want to be answering, what would you want to spend time answering?
Yeah.
And then that's your preference.
Now, if you have no preferences, if you have flexibility of consciousness, then it means it's not a driver metaprogram for you. It means it's not a driver. A driver means that it really drives the way you do your personality, the way you think and experience your sense of self. So that's what we want to loosen up and expand.
So for me, I've gotten this. So instead of seeing myself as someone who's global, that's what I am, I would say, oh, I currently do global well, but if I could also do detail well, I'd perform better.
Yeah, exactly.
Okay.
Because most of us do tend to over-identify. I'm global. Or I'm a mismatcher. And we identify, and that's what locks it in. So one way to unlock a metaprogram is not who I am, it's how I function in this context or that context most of the time in my preference, because I've really learned to do that one well. So if it becomes function rather than identity, you'll loosen it up.
People tend not to be good at one or the other. So how do you encourage somebody to do what they're not good at?
To answer the question sends you there. And if you just keep asking the question, asking the question, asking the question, you'll go there. Now, if you do have a hard time, you might need to loosen up permission. I've met a lot of people who did not have permission to do details, did not have permission to be intuitive, did not have permission to. So loosen up permission, release identity. And that'll release some of those frames that lock in one side or the other. If you've had a bad experience, you could have a bad experience with details or global, or you could have, you could meet a mismatcher and hate that mismatching because they're yes-butting you every, and you could have such an emotional thing that you hate mismatching, and therefore you're not allowed to go there either because you know it's so hurtful and ugly. So if you metastate any one of these with some negative feelings, but if these are just ways of perceiving, just different glasses, so that'll release it so that we can have more range of our flexibility with metaprograms. Let me do this real quick and let's take a break. So number 6 is play to the opposite pole of every strong and driving metaprogram. And we've been talking about that, so number 6. 7, create an action plan for developing peak performance with your potential. So that's how we're going to pull all this together. Are you willing to create an action plan to become a charismatic person or a leader or have more fitness and vitality? Are you willing to create an action plan that will develop and move toward peak performance? What is that action plan? Who will be involved in it? So now we're going to take all the details that we worked out here in performance and turn it into an action plan. We're going to write it down and we're going to make it explicit. How often will you carry out the actions? What feedback will you look for? Who will hold you accountable? So any question about action plan, those of you who are coaches, this is what we do. We do tasking. And we get the person to create their action plan so that if you have a plan and you're willing to work the plan and keep refining the plan and keep using the plan for direction, you can make things happen. Now, this step 7 is going to be really hard for the global, meaning-making, intuitive, internal, reflective. I've got it in here. But we need to get it out there. And the first thing is use the neural muscular activity of writing. Writing, getting it down so you have it externalized. And then you keep refining it. And then the ecology, just to check for ecology and congruency. How well does this new orientation feel for you? How aligned are you with actualizing this new potential? Do you believe it will empower you? Do you believe it will enrich your potentials? Any objections as you move into the future?
Is there any resources for working with clients that we can really get them to understand which part of them they are, because they may not really recognize that within themselves? So is there a resource?
Well, Figuring Out People would be the resource book. It's kind of an encyclopedia of meta programs. And the more you know it, then you can reflect back. Wow, what a grand idea. What are you going to do specifically about that? And so once you know that, you can do reflection very well and hear that meta program and coach to that meta program. So Figuring Out People, if you have some friends who want to play the meta detective game, then the meta program board game is called Meta Detective, and you need 2 or 3 or 4 people to play that at least. We play it in our master pracs to teach meta programs and to use meta programs. So they're on sale out at the table now, and they're the first 5 people who.
It said to expand the performance or get it into writing. What about expanding into meaning? So I'm very good at the performance, but it's the meaning.
Okay.
So how can you expand that?
I keep driving it to all the globals here that never get anything done. So what about you performers who need to have more reflective time? So that's where those other questions are. Are you willing to just reflect? Who are you going to reflect with? How often are you going to reflect and step back and just use your intuitions and get that game and practice? Just take the time to do it. And this is really what coaches perform for people. Get a coach. Any coach in here? Because then you have to have that conversation. And by having that conversation and just reflecting and letting someone ask you these meaning questions, it'll move you there. So it is, once again, a decision. I'm going to give myself time to reflect and think. And so these questions will drive you there. So that'd be the first thing I would suggest, making that decision. Do you have permission to take time off from activity and busyness and do something that doesn't seem productive? Do you have permission?
Yeah, I have a question about permission. Would you call that a meta state? How would you characterize permission? Because I can get that that's really important and that's going to stop. Without it, it's going to stop whatever you're up to. So my question is, how would you categorize or characterize the process of permission?
So the logical level in our mind is what is allowed and what is not allowed. What is permitted and what is tabooed. What is given that we can do and what is prohibited as a rule, a law, is not allowed. It's not allowed just to take time from me because I got so much to do. So what is the rule? Who took permission away from you from just being and experiencing, that? So this is where all the rules come in. In the meta model, it's the modal operators of impossibility and possibility and what you can and can't do, what's allowed, what's not allowed. So oftentimes permission's been taken away and we just live in that and we just, of course you can't do that. And so we just assume that that's the way it is until we give permission. Sometimes we take permission away from ourselves. I don't allow myself to do that. So we give ourselves permission. And so we're creating that allowance that's allowed to map out and I can go there.
So when you give yourself permission, and you step into that state, or I guess it's a state, would you call that a meta state? You would? Okay.
Yeah.
Specific process to get into permission.
The one I use mostly is a linguistic one. Go inside and just say the words inside. I give myself permission to create an action plan. I give myself permission to write this out. I give myself permission to take 15 minutes off a couple times a day and just be with my thoughts and just be present to the meanings I create. And notice if it settles well or if there's objections and something rattling around that has a fear of that or objection to that. And what is that objection? And that seems to be able to get to it pretty quickly. So, let's take a 15-minute break, and when we come back, we'll be ready for this particular pattern. We'll run these now.